Looking back at The Mandalorian as a whole, as an entire series, I love it to death. But sometimes, when you break it down to look at the individual chapters, there are absolutely quite a few that just don't hit the mark. Chapter 10, The Passenger, was one of those episodes for me. We pick things back up on Tatooine, and Din is ambushed on his way back to Mos Eisley. He fights off his attackers and tricks one of them to protect the child. This was probably my favorite scene of the entire episode. It's one of those moments that's played for laughs, but it's also kind of brutal, and again, we're seeing the child take it all in. He sees his father figure lie and betray an enemy like, yep, that's how we deal with our problems, I guess. Back in town, Pelly negotiates passage for a frog lady on his ship who needs transport, who also happens to know where a Mandalorian covert is. And frog lady is literally how she's listed in the credits, don't yell at me. She needs to get her eggs to her husband on a water planet called Trask. Along the way, they're met by New Republic pilots who recognize the Razor Crest from its role in attacking the prison ship back in Chapter 6. They give chase until Din crashes on an ice planet. He repairs his ship until the frog lady wanders off into a hot spring that also happens to be a Krykna. The spider-like creatures attack them, but they're saved by the New Republic pilots, who learned of some of the good Din did on the prison ship. The Razor Crest is fixed enough to lift off, and they all head to Trask. At the moment, this episode feels very much like treading water, a detour on the way to find more Mandalorians, but I'm hesitant to call it filler. I think that the farther we step back from the first season of the show, the easier it is to see what each episode is actually doing. What kind of character development it's providing for Din, especially. Chapters 4 through 6 all have a kind of side quest feel, but they're all telling us about who Din is or was and how he's changing. And I feel like there are moments within The Passenger that remind us that, hey, all this stuff is going to come back. We got significant payoff from the events of Chapter 6, not only with the New Republic pilots and the return of Trapper Wolf, but also the kinda sorta return of Zero as a translator droid, which I thought was cool. And I think Din is getting to see a little bit of karma coming his way. He attempted to do some good on the New Republic prison ship, or at the very least he attempted to be better than he once was, and the pilots recognized that and turned around to help him out. So when the season is over, or maybe even in a week after letting it sit with me, I think I'll understand this episode more. But my first impression of it was pretty meh. I feel like I know what to expect from this series now. I was straight up expecting kind of an adventure of the week story today, but I was still just underwhelmed. I did like the Krykna spider sequence a lot. The creatures were lifted straight out of Ralph McQuarrie's concept art, and they were sufficiently terrifying and threatening. I'm just having a hard time finding out what this episode is trying to say right now. But that's not going to stop me from trying. A lot of emphasis is put on the Frog Lady's children. I think Din must relate to her in some way. She's trying to protect her children, and he wants to protect his. He objects at first because he doesn't want to endanger the child's life by traveling at sublight speeds, but he does it anyway. I will say, I think it's kind of upsetting that the child eating her children is played for laughs. It's pretty messed up. I could see that being the point, though. We've seen the child is potentially going down a dark path, like when he force-choked Cara Dune. Din isn't the best role model, which I already talked about for this episode, but he still does his best to get the child to stop eating the eggs. Maybe this is like a sign that this baby isn't easily controlled, that he will continue to be unruly, and with the Force in play, things could get a lot worse. On the flip side, we do get to see Din set a good example for the child. The Frog Lady asks him to honor his word, and after looking down at the child, he finally agrees. Being the good guy is still fairly new to Din. I get the sense that Chapter 3 was his turning point, where he goes from heartless bounty hunter to someone with a conscience because he felt the need to save the life of the child that saved him. Now we're seeing him in a life or death situation with someone who is only a burden, but he still agrees to help. Saving the child wasn't just a one-time good deed. He is still changing and evolving for the better. Like the New Republic pilots, I think we'll see this pay off in future episodes. And speaking of evolving, I wonder if we're going to see that on a larger scope with the Mandalorian people. There was a line from Kuil in the recap for Chapter 9 about abandoning the old ways, and there are quite a few mentions of the Razor Crest and its age in this episode. It's from before the Clone Wars, an era long gone. It's gone through a lot and it's falling apart, and now it needs some serious repairs again. I could see all of that representing Din or the Mandalorian people, or both. Din is especially stuck following these old rules and this old creed. It's not a bad code if honoring your word is part of it, but it's interesting that Din has to be convinced to follow that part of the code. Wearing a mask all the time? Easy. It's external and obvious, but the internal rules that nobody can see are often the hardest rules to follow. Like the Razor Crest, maybe the creed, or at least many Mandalorians' attitudes towards it, needs to be updated to better fit in these trying times. I don't know, I'm trying to find some extra meaning in an episode that I thought was just fine. If I had to guess, next week I think we'll reach Trask to finish up this mission where we will likely run into Sasha Banks' character and hopefully find more Mandalorians. I don't mind these Adventure of the Week stories as long as they're balanced out with some movement of the plot. Season 1 struck a mostly good balance and hopefully Season 2 is the same. I'm also happy that we seem to be blowing through a lot of the footage shown in the trailer, so the back half of this season will be full of surprises. But that's it for today. Let me know what you thought of The Passenger in the comments. We'll be back later today to talk about this episode with our friends at the Imperial Senate Podcast, and Molly and I will put out our audio commentary for patrons as soon as we can. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all of our Star Wars coverage, and follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.